Hey everyone, this is Devin with the Long Ways podcast. I'm here with just a few brief announcements to start with. First off, you might notice that we are starting a new Long Ways Substack. That will be our place to find everything you need to find about the Long Ways. The podcast will live there, but also we're going to be providing some new material, some written material, some recommendations, and a few other exciting things to come your way. So if you haven't already registered to the Long Ways Substack, you can find a link to the description here. And also, you can find it on our social media channels and our website. Also, we like to announce that this is kind of a new podcast series we're starting right now. Instead of us talking about our own hikes, each month we're going to be talking to someone about a different hike that they've done and what it meant to them, different long ways around the world. So we're going to start with actually interviewing my sister, Kayla, who recently went on a pilgrimage of sorts along the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. Kayla is not as you'll probably hear during the podcast, she is not necessarily a long ways hiker herself. And so we wanted to get a different kind of perspective of what it is like to do one of these trails for someone who this isn't, their yearly experience. So it's a really great episode. We are excited to listen to her story, and I'll let us go from there. Hello and welcome to the Long Ways podcast. I'm Devin Windelspect, and today we are bringing you a new guest to the podcast. It's not just me and Michael or occasionally Eric. We are bringing in my sister, Kayla, who recently actually hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu in Peru. So today we thought we'd do something a little bit different because normally it's me, my father, Eric, kind of talking about the hikes we go on, our yearly hikes. But today we wanted to talk to someone who doesn't do this all the time, who is not like someone who does, a hike every year, but did something really, really cool this past November and December to hike the Inca Trail. So Kayla, I want to, tag you in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, just besides my sister, and tell us, a little bit about why you guys decided to hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kayla Windelspect. I am, as mentioned, Devin's younger sister. And in this past December, so December of 2024, me and my mom actually did the Inca Trail hike 4 days to Machu Picchu as part of a trip we went on to Peru. And kind of like Devin mentioned, I am not really a multi-day hiker like
Yeah.
Devin and Dad and Eric are. I am very much a day hiker. I really don't do the kind of camping out hikes. So even this 4 days, which I guess is kind of short compared to a lot of the hikes that you guys usually do, was kind of a big change and a big challenge for me personally. But it was definitely, I think, definitely worth it. And I know we're going to get into talking a little bit about Machu Picchu towards the end, but I would say it was definitely worth it to do this. But I'm not sure if I'd do it again. So
But we'll get to that part. I mean, I think the first thing to ask is like, the Inca Trail is a pretty famous trail, but for people who don't know what the Inca Trail is, can you just give us a bit of a description of what it is and maybe a little tiny bit of history to it?
yeah, so kind of as a disclaimer, I am not a historian. I read a couple books about this before I went because I thought it was interesting. So the Inca Trail is part of the Inca Trail today, kind of the modern Inca Trail that you hike on, is part of what was a very lengthy and very intricate network of roads created by the Inca Empire before Spanish conquest in the 1500s. And the part of the Inca Trail that we hiked was about 26 miles. I think that's about like 40 some kilometers. Everything is in metric, so I had never had any idea how long we were actually going for. That's, the curse of the dumb American. But so the part that we hiked on was a about 26 miles over about 3.5 days. You only really hike half a day, the last one, and it goes to what I believe used to be part of a pilgrimage trail to the site of Machu Picchu back when Machu Picchu was a Inca city. basically. So you go through the Andes, you start at about uh 11,000 feet, you go down a bit, and then you go back up to 14,000 feet. And then, yeah, that's definitely the hard
Hmm.
part. I actually, right now, I'm living in Colorado. I live in the Rockies, or right outside of the Rockies. And so I definitely thought that, what's 14,000 feet? It'll be fine. You definitely feel it once you get up that high.
Yeah.
It was not easy, that part of it. And then you go actually back down from there. You go all the way back down the mountain to Machu Picchu, which is, I believe, at about 8,000 feet. And you end at Machu Picchu and take the tour of the archaeological site. Um, yeah, so while you're hiking the Inca Trail, you're going past a lot of old Inca sites. I mean, they still have all of these kind of really well protected, really well preserved archaeological sites. And definitely shout out to all of the guides on the Inca Trail, who our guides especially were incredible and knew, you know, every detail about literally everything that we've passed. So we're able to give us, the history, the knew everything about not only the Inca sites, but also about like every plant. My mom is a big horticulturalist, so she was stopping about every 5 minutes to ask about, what's this plant? What's this plant? What's this plant? And they knew every single one. And they knew, like the history and like the uses and the ecology of every single one. So that was pretty amazing.
This is not the full Inca Trail. These 4 days. Isn't this like it's a vast network of trails that go back to the time of the Incan Empire, correct?
Yes. So, I mean, I have no idea how long the Inca Trail goes in total. And there's not, just one Inca Trail. There's Inca Trails.
Yeah.
It was this huge network of roads that pretty much went for the whole through the whole Inca Empire, which I believe at its height went pretty much down the entire west coast of South America. I mean, it was from a southern Ecuador to northern Chile, I think, and up through in the Andes. It was pretty amazing while we were hiking this, thinking of the people who had to build this, and how they had to
Yeah.
bring all of these, just all of this stuff up into the Andes, not only to make the trail, but also to make the sites that we went through. There were villages, old Inca villages. There were like storage depots. There were checkpoints. Before you went into Machu Picchu and everything. We went through the Gates of the Sun right before you go through Machu Picchu, which is really, really amazing. But it is really incredible to think of not only how people built all of this, up here in the Andes, but how they built just all of these trails, like pretty much all through Western South America. I mean, this was a really, really incredibly large and well-maintained empire. I mean, the Inca Trail has been, they when we were on it, they were talking a bit about the restoration efforts that they've done for the Inca Trail, but for the most part, I think it's held up pretty well. I mean, this is
Yeah.
minimum about 500 years old at this point, and we're still walking on it. So
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, and lest we forget that, you're walking through the ruins of the old Incan Empire, but the people are still there.
yes, well, especially the first day when you're hiking through towns and villages where people live. And that was actually part of the Inca Trail where they were telling us at the beginning, they were like, you need to make sure anyone who wants to hike the Inca Trail, this is my first recommendation. You need to make sure for the first couple days that you have small change because you do have to pay to use the bathrooms for the first couple days.
Good to know. Good to
Yeah.
know. Well, I mean, let's pull it all the way back. How did you find yourself? Like, what was the series of events that found you about to hike to 14,000 feet of elevation on the first day of the Inca Trail? How did this all start?
Oh, well, actually, I got roped into it a little bit. Like I said, I went with my mom, who is a bit more of a traveler than I am typically. And she really, really wanted to take this trip to Peru and invited me to go with her. And so in total, it was a 2-week trip. So actually, the Inca Trail part of it was only 4 days, but it was definitely the most intense 4 days of the
Yeah.
trip for sure. So we actually had about a week in Peru as part of this trip before we started the Inca Trail, which was actually pretty nice because before we started the Inca Trail, we actually had a couple of days at the city of Puno in Lake Titicaca, which is, I think, at about 12,000 feet. So we were able to acclimate a little bit before we started, which was nice, but it was still there. It wasn't, it wasn't just me and mom. We were part of a large group. We had about 8 people total in our group. And one of the people in our group, I felt so bad. This girl, she had terrible, terrible altitude sickness
Oh no.
through the whole Inca Trail. Like she was really, really sick, and I was really impressed that she still did the whole thing. I think if I'd been that sick, I wouldn't have made it through the first day. But it was definitely I think harder. It was definitely harder than I thought it was
Yeah.
going to be. But it was also, I think, just really rewarding. It was definitely, whenever I hear you and Dad talk about these trips, you always talk about how hard it is and kind of miserable it is, and then at the end, it's always, but I'm really glad that I
Yeah.
did it,
Yeah.
and I always thought that that was kind of dumb. And then I did this, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see it now
Yeah.
because it was kind of miserable, but I am really glad that I did it. So
Well, I mean, you're talking about the elevation a lot. I remember, I was hiking way back. I brought this up a couple of times in the podcast, but way back when I was 18, me and my high school friends decided to go hike the Colorado Trail in Colorado. And above 10, especially like 11, 12,000 feet, you really feel it.
you really, yeah, yeah. I
Like
mean,
every
that
step's
was
so much harder and breathing's harder. And
you just can't catch your breath. I mean, that was what really got me. So the second day, we was kind of when we were going straight up, we were going to Dead Woman's Pass, and I'm sure we're gonna kind of go through a step by step of the trail a little later. But it was you pretty much go straight up
yeah,
all day, and it was like you take 5 steps, or at least for me, and I was definitely in the back of the group. I was the last person to finish
yeah.
that day, but it was you take like 5 steps, then you have to stop and catch your breath, and then you take 5 steps, then have to stop and catch your breath, and I think that was kind of that was definitely part of why it was so difficult, was just I think I didn't really understand how much the altitude affects you,
And you're
especially.
living at 5,000 feet right now in Boulder. So,
Yeah, yeah. I've been up higher for hikes. I just haven't. I think 14,000 feet it is the highest I have ever been.
yeah.
Yes, that is the highest elevation I've ever been to, I've ever hiked at, and it was rough.
Well,
Yeah.
lest we forget, I mean, going back to Colorado, that is the height of the tallest mountains of Colorado that you were at.
Yes.
So those
Yes.
those massive peaks that you're like, I'm not climbing that. That's where you were at. So,
Yes. So again, it was very nice. Not sure I'd do that again,
well,
but
let's walk us through. Like you said 3.5 day. Just walk us through each day. Like, so someone who is going to get on the Inca Trail right now or is thinking about it, what should they expect with each day?
yeah, so that's actually kind of interesting. One thing that I didn't know before we started is that it's actually kind of luck of the draw what you do each day. I mean, there's kind of general similarities no matter what, but it's kind of luck of the draw which campsites you get.
Hmm.
So people get assigned to different campsites. We went in December, which is the start of the rainy season, so it was really the off season for the Inca Trail, so that wasn't really as busy as it usually is. But there's the campsites are kind of spread out, and you get assigned different ones. So you might be sharing a campsite with like one other group, but it's not going to be, packed. I think they do a really good job with they really focus on managing the Inca Trail and keeping this, heritage site together. I mean, they really don't want, thousands and thousands of people trekking through and, throwing their garbage
Yeah.
everywhere and kind of ruining these sites. They do a really good job of kind of really strictly managing that for the parks there. But for our trip, we kind of got lucky where we got really good
Yeah.
campsites. So the first day wasn't so hard. The first day was about oh, I'm trying to convert from kilometers. It was about 7 miles, I think, and it was a little up and down, but it wasn't. You weren't, doing the straight up hikes or anything. It was just kind of easing you into it. And then the first day you're walking through a lot of, again, like kind of a lot of towns where people obviously are living, and you can buy, they have all these little stands set up where you can buy some junk food from them, which is always nice because you do end up really wanting, like some Oreos when
Yeah.
you're on the trail, and you can buy water from them and everything. And the second day is where it gets really hard. So for us, the way that we got our campsites, the second day was the shortest, but it was the hardest. It had the most elevation gain. We had something like 1,100 meters. I have no idea how that is in feet. Sorry,
A lot of
math
feet.
is, yeah, a lot of feet. It was 1,100 meters of elevation gain in the first half of the day on the second day. So the way that ours was set up was that the first day was about 7 miles. The second day was much shorter, but it was much harder because you're kind of going straight up the whole day. And then the third day was our longest day. But it was pretty much all downhill on the third day. So I thought that was going to be much easier. It ended up being, it turns out if you go downhill for like 7 hours straight, it hurts.
Yes, exactly. We figured that one out on our hikes too. So
yes, exactly. And then the fourth day, you have to get up really, really early. We had to get up at 3 a.m, and then you hike into Machu Picchu. And that was only I think only like 7 kilometers. So not bad. It was just very, very early. And then you get to spend the day in Machu Picchu. But so that was our campsites, and that worked out really, really well. There were other groups that kind of had a less lucky draw where their second day was much, much longer. So they basically had to hike up this giant mountain and then hike down the mountain and then hike up another mountain.
Yeah, that sucks.
Which would have been really terrible. But for us, yeah, so the first day is just kind of easing you into it. It's kind of up and down a little bit, but it's not so bad. And then the second day, what we did was that we had to hike up to what's called Dead Woman's Pass, which is the highest point of this part of the Inca Trail. It's about 14,000 feet. And what you do is they get you up at like 5 a.m, and you just walk straight up until, yeah. So we were told we were going to end early in the afternoon. That was kind of the good part, that we'd be at the next campsite by like 1 to 2 in the afternoon. And we actually made pretty good time, but it was several hours of you're just hiking straight up this mountain. And for us, because we were at the start of the rainy season, it did start to rain on us. And it is technically summer in the southern hemisphere, but if you're up at 14,000 feet, that doesn't really matter. It was quite cold, and it was kind of pouring on us. And we were sitting there with our rain gear and our ponchos on top of our rain gear, and just it was kind of one of those moments where so you can, on the Inca Trail, you can technically turn back. It's kind of, I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, it's kind of a dick move.
Yeah.
Because so not, if you're sick or if you're injured, that's a different thing, but because if you turn back, then for the Inca Trail, you have a team of porters who are carrying your things. And, first of all, God bless these guys. I could never do it. But if you turn back, then they have to get all your stuff and go all the way back with you. And I think that there was several moments, probably the second day, where kind of the only reason I didn't turn back was because I felt like it would be too much of a dick move to ask these people to go back with me, because the second day was pretty miserable. And then it kind of gets to the point where it's like, all right, at this point, the shortest route for me is just to go up the mountain. You just have the shortest, the way that this is over the fastest is that you just get up to the top of the mountain.
I want to come back to, before you did this hike, you kind of told me I'm not really sure I can do it. I'm, a little afraid that I'm not gonna be able to complete it. And you did, which is amazing. But I think what you're saying right now is something we've all encountered on the trail, but it's that mental aspect of the trail is just really hard sometimes. And I'm kind of asking, how did you get through, besides just the weird, peer pressure, not even peer pressure, just the, I don't want to be a dick to these guys pressure. How did you get through the mental challenge of this?
Yeah. So I think First of all, I think that this, the second day of the trail was something that I was definitely dreading,
Hmm.
not just for the hike, but kind of the whole week that we were in Peru beforehand, because I kept thinking, I'm not going to be able to do this. And I think one of the things that was really probably the main thing of how you're able to get through it is that everyone, not just in our group, but also the guides that we have were so supportive. And first of all, we had a really, really good group. Everyone in our group, got along really well and was like really, really supportive to each other and everything. But our guides also were very much, telling us, like it is a very mental thing. You can't tell yourself I can't do it. And
Hmm.
they were telling us, it doesn't matter if this takes longer, it doesn't matter if you're the last one in the group. And I was
Yeah.
100% the last one in the group, especially on the second day. But they're saying, like it doesn't matter how slow you have to go, you can get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And they told us these stories actually of, like the people that they've had on the group. They were telling us this story about this guy who was like 82 or 83, and it had always been his kind of bucket list thing that he wanted to hike the Inca Trail. And then finally he's like, well, I'm just going to do this,
Mhm.
and they were talking about how it was, it took him a really, really long time, but he got to the campsite at the
Yeah.
end, and they helped him up the mountain and everything. And so I think that that was that kind of like mental attitude um was a big part of it. But I think that there's also kind of the mental attitude of a little bit of like, I want to be able to say that I did it.
Hmm.
Like I don't want to be the person who turned back. And again, I think that it's different, like they if if you like sprain your ankle on the
Yeah.
trail or
Yeah.
something, like that's very different. Or if you get really sick, like I was talking about this girl in our group who I was like genuinely really surprised she didn't turn back because she was like she was like throwing up,
Hmm.
like she was really, really suffering from this altitude sickness. But I think it did kind of become just a personal thing, not just kind of the peer pressure, but kind of a personal thing of like, I'm all the way out here and I want to be able to say that I did the Inca Trail. I want to be able to say that I hiked
Yeah.
to Machu Picchu. I don't want to have to say to myself that I gave up doing this. And I will say that as soon as you get to the top of the mountain, or at least for me, as soon as I got to the top of that mountain and I was up on the Dead Woman's Pass, I was like, all right, I'm good for the rest of the trip because nothing I do in this trip is going to be as hard as
Been there.
that. Like, it felt like it was such a weight because like I had been dreading
Yeah.
it so much, and then it was such a weight off my shoulders that I'm like, all right, I don't like I've got like 2 more days of this, but nothing is going to be as hard as that was. So, and then you have to go down the mountain, and that was actually also quite tough because it was pouring rain. It's the Inca Trail is all stone. It was very, very slick. So it did take us actually quite a long time to get down to our campsite as well. But yeah, and then after that, the third day was just really long, or longer than the other days, but it was pretty much you go for us the way that our campsite was, we had to go a little bit up in the morning, but then after that, it was just kind of all downhill because Dead Woman's Pass is, at 14,000 feet, and then you have to get down to Machu Picchu,
Yeah.
which is at like 8,000 feet. So it was just all downhill the whole day. And I slid a couple times. Lucky for us, no one in our group got hurt, but we all kind of wiped out on the wet stones a couple times. So,
Well, I mean, we've talked about the challenge of this, and I think, for people who are listening, kind of being real about the challenges is important. You don't want to tell anyone like, hey, it's not a challenge. It's not going to be difficult, you know?
yeah. Well, that was what you told me. So I called Devin the night before we went, and I was telling him, I don't think that I can do this. I was talking to you saying like I'm really kind of freaked out about this. I don't know if I can do it, and your advice to me, because you were asking me, well, what are you afraid of? And I'm like, well, I'm afraid it's going to be too hard. And your advice is pretty much you just have
Yeah,
to accept that
exactly.
it's going to suck. Which I thought was terrible advice when you gave it to me. But then when I was actually doing it, I'm like, oh shit, he was right.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it.
So
Sometimes, like, we've had, and I'm going to get to this part with you, but we've had these wonderful moments in the trails, but like, you have to accept sometimes that like you're going to be in torrential downpours or horrible heat. And like, but, I mean, obviously, the worst thing that could happen could be like a serious injury or worse. But if you kind of get into your head, okay, the worst thing that's going to happen to me is that this sucks.
Yeah.
then like, okay, that's it. Like, it just sucks, and like,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And it is definitely, I think that I haven't really experienced this before because like I said, I do day hikes. I
Yeah.
don't do this kind of camping stuff or this kind of multi-day stuff. But I did have kind of this experience of kind of like, all right, this sucks. And the only thing that you can do is just keep walking.
Yep.
And every step you take is one step closer to being able to pass out tonight. So
Well, but let's talk about the good parts of the trail. What was like the
yeah.
best moment on the trail for you?
um oh, that's a good question. Well, first of all, it was really, really pretty.
Mm,
The Andes are just really beautiful. And I think probably the best moment on the trail for me, oh, it's hard to pick one, but when we were going down from Dead Woman's Pass, it was raining very hard, but I felt so much better knowing that that was behind me. I think
yeah.
was part of it. Like my mood just like immediately lifted as soon as I got up to the top of it. But then when you're hiking down Dead Woman's Pass, you're kind of going beside this like really, really beautiful waterfall that goes
Hmm.
all the way down this mountain. And you couldn't really see it from where we were, but the guides were talking about how there's this like lagoon on like the very, very top of that mountain. And there's just this really beautiful waterfall that goes all the way down. And there was a couple times where kind of the rain kind of paused for a second. You could see a little better, and it was just this gorgeous, gorgeous view of like the whole Andes Mountains. And I think there was kind of that kind of paired with the feeling of like, oh God, I actually did it,
Yeah.
thing that was just, I felt so good coming down that mountain. And then even though I did, almost kill myself a couple of times falling on rocks. And I think that, and then getting down to the campsite and then having lunch and then napping
Naps are
in the
important.
tent right after that, like being able to change into dry clothes
Yep.
and just like passing out for like 2 hours. That was really, really nice.
I think I've had some of my best naps of my life after a long hike on one of these
Yeah.
trails. So
Yeah. So that feeling of coming down the mountain tied probably with right after that, like changing into dry socks, was also probably one of the best feelings on the trail. Yeah, so definitely my advice, especially for if you're going in the rainy season, bring more pairs of socks than you think you're gonna need.
yeah.
Bring extra pairs of socks. It's worth the wait. That was a big thing also with preparing for it is that you do have a pretty strict weight limit of what you can bring because again, like you have the porters who have to carry all of this stuff. So, don't be a dick to the porters. Don't try to get the porters to, don't try to like slide stuff in there. They've got to carry this and they got to carry it way faster than you are. Yeah, and I guess my other recommendation would be get the hiking poles. Like either bring
Yeah.
your hiking poles or rent hiking poles
Always
because
get hiking poles. Always
yeah,
get hiking poles.
because especially like going down on that slick rock I was so glad that I had those hiking poles. There was actually someone in our group who didn't get hiking poles, and it was actually because she had arthritis in her hands, so that was why she didn't use them. But for that downhill part, another member of the group like gave her one of his, so that because it's like otherwise you might,
It's important.
it is really important. But yeah, and then the next day was actually really nice weather-wise. We got really lucky where we only really had the one rainy day. And
Yeah.
honestly, if we were going to have one rainy day, I'm actually kind of glad that it was the second day because we were all going to be miserable that day anyways.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so bad. And then the second day, yeah, it was just kind of long, but we went through, I think the second day we went through the most Inca sites. We hit like four different Inca sites, and it's really kind of cool because the closer you get to Machu Picchu, the more, oh, I don't really know how to say it, like almost like the more like spiritual
Hmm.
they become because like the guys were saying this did used to be a pilgrimage route. And the last site that you hit, this was actually the fourth day in the morning, but the last site you hit between the Gates of the Sun, and which is this really cool kind of like fort almost that's like right up in a pass, and you can usually see Machu Picchu from it. We again rainy season, there were a bunch of clouds in the way, but
Yeah.
it was still really, really cool to be up there. But between the Gates of the Sun and Machu Picchu, if I'm remembering right, the last site that you hit before Machu Picchu, they had it was this big, I'm blanking on the word, altar. Basically, it was this big like black rock that had been used as an altar. And when you pass by it, you can see that there's still people still leave offerings of like coca leaves on this rock, and people still leave little like coca candies like without the wrapper. Yeah, don't leave trash on the Inca Trail, please. But and it's just really cool to kind of pass by that and just kind of think about, I guess, just like how many people did that before you. Like not so much like the not just, you know, like the tourism and the hiking, but like the people who did this as, you know, a religious or political, you know, pilgrimage back in the Inca Empire, of like how many people passed through, like passed by that same rock and passed through this same area. And it was, I mean, saying that it's really cool is, you know, a huge understatement, you know, but it was so cool to see all of that.
Well, we're coming up on time here, but one of the things I want to ask you is, so, we're doing this thing more on the long ways where we're talking to more people who are doing their hikes. And I want to, like, one of the things I always want to ask is like what you got out of the hike. And I want to take a step back here and say, like, when I did my first hike like this, which was the Tour Mont Blanc, was with Dad, our response was, oh my God, we want to do this every year, all the time. And that's what we did. But, yours is just a little bit different, it seems. I mean, you've already said I probably wouldn't do that again, even though it was an amazing experience. So what do you take out of this trail? But, it sounds a little cliche, but like, what are you bringing with you coming from the trail?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I'm not sure. You know, you never want to make definitive statements about this kind of thing because you don't know what's going to happen. I'm not sure I would do something like that again. I think I'm, for the foreseeable future, going to stick to day hikes. But I think it definitely felt, you know, first of all, it did definitely feel like a bucket list thing. It did definitely feel like a bragging rights thing that I get to say that I did
Yeah.
it. But I think that the main thing I'm taking away is that I did do it, you know, like and now I know that I can do it because I was so nervous and so anxious about it beforehand. And I was so convinced that I like physically could not handle it. And I think kind of the lesson to take away is that I guess I'm capable of more than I thought that I was, you know, and it is one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is just going to suck, but you can get through it, you know. And I think that that's kind of a really good thing to be able to take away, of just kind of like you're capable of more than you think that you are.
I think that's a really good place to end. Well, Kayla, thank you for joining the long ways. Maybe we'll see you on another trail like that in the future. Maybe not.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
To end our podcast, I'm Devin Windelspect.
And I'm Kayla.
And this is the Long Ways Podcast. Thank you for listening.